Hey, my name is Tiffany. Welcome to my channel. I wanted to make this YouTube because I wanted to share about Jesus and I wanted to talk about everything that he's done in my life. There's so much that I've learned. I became a disciple of Jesus Christ, and if we are disciples of Jesus Christ, then we need to evangelize. We need to share about him. We need to walk in his ways. I want you guys to hear about Jesus, everything that I'm witnessing in my life about him, the good news, questions, or anything that we can learn from each other. We should reach out in the community online. So I wanted to start my first video by sharing my testimony, how I grew up, what I went through, and how God took me from that to here. I grew up in a family household that did not believe in God. It was very chaotic. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom and him were always partying. They had a party lifestyle. So I kind of grew up in that environment, and being left in the care of other people, sometimes even family members. I had gotten taken advantage of at a young age. I was molested by a family member, and I was about 5 years old around that time. My innocence was snatched away from me from an early age, and ever since then it was always being snatched away from me, more of my innocence taken. Like, the enemy was targeting me from that very young age. And although I didn't know it was wrong what happened to me, I thought that it was something that was okay or to do or was expected. Going into a teenager, I began to realize that it was wrong, and I began to feel shame. And I began to go through depression. I started to cut myself. I started to receive nightmares every night as well. And in those nightmares, that's when the enemy would really attack me. He would show up. I remember like one dream I had, he showed up like as a white, dark face, dark, like black under his eyes. And he was in the corner of my room. It was just a head. And I was stuck in my bed. Like, I couldn't move. I was going through sleep paralysis, and he would just laugh at me and tell me, God doesn't love you. And at the time, like, I didn't even know who God was. I never grew up in a Christian household, so I didn't even know who God was. But the devil was already telling me that whoever God was didn't love me. I never got curious to know God. My dad, he had family that were like Christian, so he would take us to church sometimes with my mom. But they were still living the party life, so I wasn't really taking church like serious, or it wasn't really being shown in my household. So even though we went to church sometimes, I just thought, it was just a place to go to, like, just sit down and have fun, with the other kids, because we will go to the classes while they will listen to the sermons. That is the only like amount of God that I knew in my life, those moments that we would go to church. And also around that same time, since I was a little girl, my grandma would dress us up. She is a Jehovah's Witness, and she would take us to her church. But it was very weird. I never really understood going there. We would just sit most of the time and read from songs from a book. And it never really, I never really felt nothing there. I never felt, God. And I didn't know, even though I was reading about him and the Bible studies that they will also give to us, I never understood it. Like, God wasn't real, or yeah, maybe there's a God, but I wasn't feeling him. He's not active in my life, so why should I continue to know him? It wasn't really getting my attention, honestly. Like, it was just something that they wanted to share with us. So yeah, that's all I knew about God around that age. So by 12, 13 years old, I was already self-harming myself. I was, cutting myself. I didn't want to kill myself, even though I had thoughts of suicide. I didn't want to kill myself because I was scared to die. I had that in me. Like, I was scared to die, to see what was going to come after, because so much of the spirit realm was already revealed to me through nightmares, through seeing demons in my sleep, that I knew that there was something, but I didn't know what to expect. So I wanted to hurt myself because I thought that I did not matter, that's what I deserve. All the things that I went through, that's what I felt. And my relationship with my mother wasn't good as well. We would always fight, and she didn't really see what was going on with me until around ending 13. My grandmother actually saw the cuts on my arm, and I said that was the cat, you know, it wasn't me. But they knew something was going on, but they never really dug into that area for as far as I remember. I do remember that getting older, like around 14, I'm sorry, I forgot to say the part about where my dad left. So at 7, my dad left, so my mom started dating other men, and that is when my brother was born by someone else. She was with that guy for about a year, and it didn't work out, and my mom ended up finding someone else, and that person became my stepdad for the rest of my life, basically. But so with my biological dad, there's 3 of us, and then with another man, there's my brother, and with my stepdad, there's my sister. So there's 5 of us. Yeah, I grew up without my dad. I didn't really have like that dad figure. Even though I did have a stepdad, I, you know, was not really like seeing him as my real dad, because although my dad like left at a young age, I was a young age, I still knew that was my real dad, and I had a connection with him. So when he left, it really hurt me, and I knew that was my dad. And my stepdad, we would just call him by his name. We never really called him dad or anything like that. So fast forward back to when I was 14. I remember my mom I think she contacted my dad to tell him what was going on with me, with the cutting situation. And also I was rebelling a lot. That was a time where phones were coming in, and I got a phone at a very young age, and I started to send pictures of myself and see things online that was revealed to me. I was exposed to a lot of sexual things at a very young age. My innocence was just torn away from me, and so I was going through a lot of things, and so my mom called my dad to let him know everything that was going on with me. And my dad at the time was dating someone that she was like a medium, but a Christian. I don't know if the right word is medium, but I remember at that time that's what I understood, or she had a gift. I remember that they came over to visit me to pray for me. So we all went to my room and they surrounded me in prayer. I just remember being so little and looking up and seeing, you know, them surrounding me, and she just began to weep. She just started crying like crazy, and she was just like like crying. I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, I didn't know what was happening, but she was talking, and I remember this because it was just so traumatizing to me. Because she said that she felt all the things that I was feeling. She felt all my pain and my suffering, and she just couldn't stop crying, to the point that she fell to the floor and she was crying. And then I remember that the prayer ended, but she wanted to say something because they helped her like to stop crying. You know, they got concerned. And so she said after the prayer and she calmed down from crying that she saw something behind me, or she saw a vision. She saw a vision that I was standing, and there was like a black figure behind me, and that its hand was on me, and it was saying, she's mine, you know. So something dark was claiming me at a very young age. And I remember that wasn't the only vision that she had, though. She had another vision that she saw me in a white dress, and she saw me holding hands of children, and I was leading them. So that makes sense now that I can see my life now in God, because God made those visions complete, right? Because, you know, that's like later into the testimony, but let me just continue. She had those visions, and I remember it was so traumatizing. I knew something spiritual was happening. Still, I didn't see God. I didn't understand him. And after that, you know, they just left, and everything was still the same. Nothing really changed in my life. I was still depressed. The only thing that changed is that I was starting to suffer with anxiety now. I had social anxiety. I couldn't talk to anybody. If someone tried to talk to me, my face just got burning red. I could feel it. I would feel embarrassed. I just couldn't even look anyone in the eye. My hands would start shaking. I couldn't order for myself. They would try to push me to do those things, you know, to buy this at the grocery store, you know, use the card to pay. And I would refuse. I would refuse and I would cry if they really try to push me. Like, I would break down and feel like sometimes I would have like a panic attack. So that's what I was going through. 15 came, and yeah, it's the same thing. But this time, like, I'm starting to have a lot of attention from guys at school. And I was a little bit confused on my sexuality, because the person that was the family member that had took advantage of me was of the same sex of me. And so I knew from seeing my mom with a man that, you know, that was a natural thing. But I also was exposed to the same sex relationships, you know, from also seeing things online. I had struggled with that, but I would never expose that in my life. Like, that was just hidden behind doors, you know. And so I would always have, you know, a boyfriend, you know, because I had a lot of attention, and it was becoming like very sexual, my relationship with them, because of everything that I was already exposed to. And so I remember that I would send pictures to them, and, you know, thank God around that time nothing was so serious with the social media that, you know, like today everything is just out and about. But yeah, nothing got exposed of me. I thank God for that, because honestly it was very humiliating, that is. And so that's what I was going through at 15. By 16, I already went through relationships. One day, one of my ex-boyfriends tried to contact me to tell me if I wanted to get IHOP, because it was like free IHOP day or pancake day. And this was in high school, and I was like, okay, sure. So he came to my house, but he came with a friend. And that friend, like, I guess I caught his eye. And so I think the next day he texted me, or he texted my ex-boyfriend that came to the house about me. And I don't know how, we ended up following each other on social media. And we ended up like a couple days later just texting. And it was just like that we just bonded. We had like this connection to each other. And mind you, he is not my type at all. He was not my type at all. But there was just something that pulled me to him. He was also like in the world, and by then he's the one that really introduced me to smoking. I'm sorry, I started smoking through someone in school who introduced me around 12. Around the same age that I became depressed, I started to smoke weed. So by 12 I started smoking weed. You know, my parents also smoked weed in front of me in the house, so I thought it was okay. And by the time that they found out, I was 15, so they thought it was okay too. I was old enough to do that. And as I got a little older, around 16, when I met this guy, he was introducing me more to weed. So I would smoke more weed, like heavy amount of weed. That just became my joy, to numb everything that I was feeling. It made me feel better, but at the same time it didn't. And we ended up, you know, going through a lot of things. I lost my virginity to him. So that's one thing. We were very toxic. We were in a very toxic relationship, but there was like this extreme love there for each other. We didn't understand it. There was just this thing between us, but we would always hurt each other. He, you know, throughout that time, he met my parents. He would come to my house, and even we ended up even smoking with my parents. It was just something that was normal. He's the one who introduced me to alcohol, because he was like a part of that party life, and, you know, so I got introduced to all of that. And honestly, like, alcohol never really took a big part of me, but I would just, when I wanted to drink, I would just drink to be like basically knocked out. Like, it was just to numb everything. It wasn't even to enjoy it. It was just to, like, so I could just be knocked out. I was like not wanting to live still around that same age. Around that same age, 17, I remembered that one day I got into a big fight with my mom. We didn't have a good relationship at all. And I remember one time she said, we were in a big argument, and I had said, I'm gonna kill myself. And I remember she said, do it. And so I took that literal. I forgive my mom for everything that has happened in the past. I know that those were a lot of demons that were speaking through my family, because there was just a big curse on my family. My family didn't know Jesus at all, and the past generations, I know that I heard that my grandmother would do witchcraft and all these things. So there were so many curses on my family that I don't blame my mom. I don't blame anyone in my family for everything that happened in my life. I forgave all of them already, and I love them deeply. So yeah, she said that. She said, do it. So I took that serious. I had got one of those razors to like shave, and I just grabbed it and I went slash on my thigh to try to bleed out or something. I don't know. Like, at the same time, I was still afraid to die, but I was like, you know what? I hate myself. And I cut my leg, and I have a huge, and it opened, my skin opened a big amount that couldn't, I had to go to the hospital. So they took me to the hospital, and the doctors were like noticing, like, that's a pretty, straight cut. They had their thoughts, but I just kept reassuring that no, I didn't do anything. It was an accident. Thank God, nothing happened with that. They just gave me stitches, and I was on my way out. So yeah, that was a time that I tried to kill myself, basically. In a sense, I still have the scar on my leg. It's pretty huge. I could put a picture here so you guys can see like how it looks. But yeah, that's how I got that scar, and I really regret that. Everything happens for a reason, and God has healed me of so much, and this is part of my testimony for those people that are going through the same things. So yeah, I forgot to also say that throughout those years, from 15, 16, 17, my relationship with my stepdad began to change. He was very trying to take that the head of the household position, and he was very aggressive. And I remember a lot of times he would be very aggressive with me in discipline. And I remember one time that something happened between us. Maybe I was disrespectful, I don't know, a lot of teenagers are. And he wanted to take my phone, and I refused for him to get my phone. So he chased me to my room. I got on the bed with my phone, and he put his hands. He's like 6 feet, and he's a very big guy, and I'm only 4 feet and 9 inches. I'm 4'9". So imagine like a huge guy and a little tiny girl. He put his hands around my neck and was choking me until I gave up my phone. And that's a lot of things I went through my stepdad. So around that, okay, so fast forward again, by my age 17, I'm going on and off with this guy. And then I also have friends. Every friend was meant to destroy me, sent by the enemy. I can say that. I would get into fights because of these friends, into a lot of drama, a lot of chaos. I would want to fight everyone. I didn't care about myself. I didn't care about my life. And there was this one particular friend that she introduced me to a lot of like criminal life, like gang life, I guess you could say. But I got introduced to that, and it wasn't me. It wasn't me, but I was involved. I was there a lot of the times when they went to go do something. Like one time I literally saw them rob somebody right in front of me, and there was something in me that in that moment I wanted to cry, because I'm like with these people and I'm witnessing this, and I don't want to witness this. I don't want that to happen to the guy. They robbed him right there in front of me, and they took his wallet. It was like $500 to $900 in there. That guy was walking home from work. He was an older man. And she would help me a lot in situations that I would face. She would protect me. She would give, smoke with me. She would give me a place to stay sometimes. Because of my relationship with my mother, I started to run away. So that was the place I would go to. And with the boyfriend I had at the time, whenever we broke up, I would go to him. But whenever we broke up, I would go to her, basically. A lot of things happened around that time that I don't want to take too long to tell my testimony, but that's part of it. Those are like the main things I remember. I remember one time I was at my mom's house again. I got into a big fight with my mom, and my stepdad had got involved, and I remember he was threatening me to hit me and all these things. And I remember I was telling him, no, you're not my dad to be doing these things. You're not gonna hit me anymore. I was already like 17, almost 18. And so I remember that he grabbed me and he just slammed me to the wall. And I remember my back hit the wall. And at the time, my grandmother was there, like my brothers and my sisters were there, and they were all like crying. Me and my sister were together. We were with my friend at the time, the one I told you that she was involved with a lot of like criminal activity. She was there and she witnessed that. She witnessed that. She went to the car and she got her gun and she just started shooting it in the neighborhood, and all the neighbors came out, and it was so embarrassing because they knew everything that was going on with us. And I remember she started shooting it, and then that's when my mom, and they were just screaming at me like everything was my fault. And I remember walking out that door, looking back to my mom with such like a heartbroken, like my heart was broken, because that's my mom and she's choosing this guy over me. You know, she let him hit me, she let him do this to me. She's never there for me. You know, she told me all these things. You know, she will call me all these words that I'm not gonna say. She doesn't remember a lot of the things that she used to say to me, but you know, that will never come out of my mind. But like I said, I forgave her. I love her. You know, she's my mom. But yeah, I suffered. I went through a lot of things. I remember leaving. I went to stay with my friend, and I was depressed. I did not want to be there. You know, like I couldn't even get a job because I was so filled with anxiety. I couldn't work. So I was like, this is not gonna last long. You know, and around that time, me and the guy were broken up, and we had gotten back together around that time. And I remember that he told me to go to his house, and I had to sneak through the window, go in his room, because you know, I met his parents like once, but I didn't really, you know, they were really strict, I guess. At that time, that's all I knew about them, that they were really strict, and I couldn't really go in the house like that. So yeah, I snuck in his house, in his room, and I basically lived in his room. And when he would go to work, I would hide in his room and lock the door, make sure that they wouldn't go in there. And I remember this one time they did go in there. I had to hide in the room, but thank God they never found me or nothing. And that was like a really hard time. You know, eventually I had to figure out my situation. I can't hide in the room forever. So my boyfriend at the time and I ended up living in a trailer, and he was the only one working. He was taking care of me, so he moved out his parents' house. We ended up going to live in the trailer. And I was just hitting rock bottom. I hit rock bottom. I was just drinking, smoking weed all day long, just numb. You know, I was just numb. There was no word for my life. I was like, there's no point in living. My life is nothing. I have no meaning. There's nothing that I can do. I have anxiety. What can I do? I was basically so destroyed in all areas of myself. And he would come home to me sometimes just to see me drunk, laying down on the bed, you know, and it was very much like that until something had happened that we had to move out. And we moved out and went back to my mom's house. Bad mistake. And we ended up living with my mom in a room. And I remember one time, my sister had a boyfriend as well around that time, and he had said a lie because my mom and I ended up getting into a fight, of course. And I remember my mom attacked me, and I just pushed. I was not gonna let her just attack me anymore. I was tired of that, and I was just pushing her off of me. And my boyfriend at the time was removing my mom off of me, and I guess my sister's boyfriend saw, and he tried to say that my boyfriend grabbed my mom by her neck, and you know, but that was not true. And so my mom, she didn't remember anything about the fight, and we left. When we left, we ended up leaving to my boyfriend's uncle's house. So like, it was just basically so embarrassing. We were just house hopping at this time. We stayed there, and his uncle was Christian, and so, you know, he had a big heart to let us sleep on his couch, and we stayed there for a couple of days until we had something to figure out. But meanwhile, my boyfriend went back to the house, my mom's house, to go get some things that we left. I didn't want to go because I didn't want to see them. But, you know, my sister's boyfriend convinced my stepdad that my boyfriend hurt my mom, like grabbed her off of me. So that was in my stepdad's mind. So when my boyfriend at the time went to the house, he ended up talking with my stepdad, And out of nowhere, you know, my boyfriend, he's not such an aggressive guy, and he's like not that much taller than me. So imagine again a big guy and a smaller guy compared to him. And my stepdad just black hit his face so hard. He just left, and he was like, don't ever touch my wife again, you know. But he never did. He was like, I never did. Anyways, my boyfriend left. He came back to you know, the house, and I just saw his eye was just all red. Inside of his eye was all red, and you know, he was bruised a little bit on his cheek. And I was so upset because I was very tired of my stepdad's anger and how he handles things all the time, because I went through that, and now he's affecting people I love at this point. I called the police. We didn't really take it further than that, you know. I didn't want to, you know, get so involved with that because my boyfriend was not legal. So, you know, I didn't want to take things further in that way. So my boyfriend's uncle started talking to his mom to say, hey, why don't you just let them live with you? Like, that's your son. You know, and my boyfriend has his own testimony of the things he went through with his parents. So their parents actually told us to go stay with them, and they had like an office that they split in two. They put a curtain up so then we could have half of the office to sleep there. So we were living with his parents now, and this is when everything started to change, because I started to know and realize that his parents were Christian. And I didn't know that. I didn't know anything. I didn't know that he was religious. He was living a party life. You know, he didn't ever told me nothing about that. So when we started to live there, we were obviously still drinking and stuff, but we had to hide it because of his parents. I ended up finding out his dad was a pastor. Out of all places, that's where I ended up being, in a pastor's home. His mom is a prophet, and we were both in the world. And I didn't know anything about God. I didn't understand, you know, anything that they were. You know, I didn't grow up Christian or religious. So I was just like, they would invite me. His mom started to talk to me sometimes about going to church, and I'll be like, I don't know, like something had gotten in my heart to, which is like the Holy Spirit, right? To go to church. We never went because my boyfriend at the time, he felt guilty because he grew up Christian and he left God because of things that happened to him in his life. And he went into the world, so he didn't want to, he was, you know, in the party life. He didn't want to go to church like that because he knows better. Now, he did not want to go to church walking in there, acting everything's normal, knowing that he's smoking weed, drinking, and, you know, living the party life. We had never went, right? So one thing I didn't know at the time is that his mom would come to our door, and she would just put her hand on the door and start praying and interceding for us that whole time that we were living there. So over time, drinking, like over a year had passed. That is when God started to move in my life. Supernaturally, God moved into my life around that time. We were still drinking and doing all those things in the house, and his dad was getting fed up with us because he would look in the garbage and he would see the alcohol and the wrappers for our weed, and he was at that point ready to kick us out, but we didn't know that at the time. He wanted to kick us out, and his mom was like, no, like she was like really fighting for us to give us a chance to wait on God, to like he's gonna do something. His mom really had faith that God was gonna do something. So around that time, his mom went out and got me an English Bible, and we had a language barrier, because she was just Spanish. They only speak Spanish, and you know, my Spanish is not that great, but yeah, I understand it because of my grandma. She bought me a Bible, and before she gave it to me, she prophesied over that Bible. So when she gave me that Bible, like God supernaturally worked into my life, into my heart. I opened that Bible after a couple of days, and as soon as I started reading about Jesus, like I couldn't stop reading. This was my hope. This was my salvation to everything that I was feeling that I had in me, that I wanted to be free of. I started reading about everything, that who he was and what he does and who he is and what he did for me. And especially the chapter about anxiety. All of those things I wanted so desperately to be free from. Instantly, I said yes to God. And in that week, I stopped smoking and I gave up drinking instantly because I wanted Jesus in my life. I was meditating on God, like I want him, and I trust him, and I believe in him. I was so ready for him. I ended up actually giving my boyfriend at the time an ultimatum, that because once I found who Jesus was, I was just like, I want to give my whole self to him. Like, this is God. He wants to know me. Why wouldn't I? Like, yes, I'm in. So I wanted to just change my life completely. I didn't want to smoke anymore. I didn't want to drink. And, you know, I didn't want to be around that because I didn't want to be tempted. You know, I was also new to the faith. So I gave him the ultimatum that either he joins me to see God together, or I leave. And I really was going to leave. I trusted God that no matter what was going to happen to me, no matter where I go, he's going to be the one to help me now. Because in the Bible it says, don't worry about tomorrow, for the day worries about itself. So, you know, that was a passage of anxiety that God revealed to me, and I trusted in him. I trusted in his word. There was just something in me to know, to trust it. My boyfriend was like, okay. He thought about it and stuff, and he very hesitant. He was like, let me just finish this jar of weed that I have. And I was like, if you really believe in God, you will give that whole jar to him and you would just throw it out. And the next day, he took what I said. He did it. He went to roll everything up in a blunt, and he actually ended up throwing everything out. You know, I guess the conviction hit him. I don't know, but because he knew Jesus. He knew God. He was raised Christian. So he knew that God was talking to him. And at the same time, around that time, videos were coming out about China, about, you know, that the sea was turning red, and, you know, all these revelations that the Bible talks about that's going to happen in the end time. So he knew that Jesus was going to come. So when I also showed him that, he was just like, what is he doing? He needs to get it together. Like, he needs to go back to God. You know, regardless of what happened, he needs to go back to God. And so ultimately he decided that. We went to church together. And I remember when we went to church, it was like so good. We gave our life to Jesus. And I remember in that week, we ended up trying to go to an English church because we went to his parents' church, but it was just Spanish. And it's like really not my culture because it was like mostly one culture there. And so we went to an English church. And I remember after that day, we got home and his sister was at the house. And I remember that she just gave him such a big hug. And she was like crying because like she couldn't believe that her brother was back in God's plan, back with God. You know, we all have the decision to believe and to follow Jesus or not. And, you know, he wasn't in that path for a long time. You know, his dad was a pastor. His sister was, you know, preaching in the church and all these things, but her brother wasn't there, you know. So I know that that was hard for her to see her brother lost in the world, knowing the truth, you know. But glory be to God that through everything, God had a perfect plan for both of us. And I remember that year we gave ourselves to God. We ended up going back to his parents' church because that is where the Holy Spirit is. Like, small churches, don't underestimate, because the glory of God manifests there. There is the power of the Holy Spirit there. I remember being always like a day by day, like delivered from something. God will always speak to me and teach me, and I just had such a thirst, and I still do, to go to God. And I remember I was praying so hard that I started to receive dreams. I started to receive dreams from God, and God started to reveal himself to me in so many things, in so many ways. And one of the dreams that I could tell you is that I literally saw Jesus. Like, once I got saved, I started to pray so hard for my family to get saved. So after my stepdad had threw me against the wall, and I went to my friend's house, there was huge red marks on my back. Like, I was bleeding all on my back because of the wall hit. It was like, it gets too hard, and because the wall has like stuff on it. So I had that on my back, and my boyfriend at the time saw it, and he was like, what? Like, he was just disbelief. He was upset, he was angry, you know. But that was when he told me, like, come live with him. So when I got saved and when God started moving my life, I went to my family's house, my mom's house, and I went and I acts of faith, I obeyed Jesus, because he said, we don't forgive, then he's not going to forgive us. So even though it was so hard for me, I had went up to him and I told him, I forgive you. And when I was starting to speak this to him, I just started crying. But he also felt remorse. Like, he felt, I guess, guilt and all those things for what he did, and he was just so happy that I actually came and forgave him. Even though he didn't ask for forgiveness, I told him he didn't have to. I already forgave him. I forgave him, and we hugged it out. And when I forgave him, I'm telling you, like, I forgave. Like, now we have a good relationship. I forgave him. I forgave my mom, because at that time I was not talking to her at all anymore. They were, in shock to see that my life was changing and everything in me was changing how I was. And I remember that I had an act of boldness of wanting them so desperately to, know Jesus and know God. I went to my mom, because my mom, she was a heavy drinker at the time, wine. I remember that I went to her and I showed her verses of where it says do not drink. And it was really awkward, but those were like the little seeds that we're planting, because eventually God answered my prayers. I was praying every day for them, and something I never thought would happen, that they would actually come to this church, even though it was not like our type of people, because they were a different culture. They went and they stayed there till this day. They're still attending, and so this day they're every day they're working on becoming better in Jesus Christ and walking in him. So yeah, God broke the curse, and he started with me and my brothers and my sisters. I brought them to Jesus too. They saw everything that happened with me. The first one I brought was my sister. She's the younger one before me, the second born, and she was filled with the Holy Spirit one day on a prayer night that I brought her, and she gave herself to Jesus. She wanted him because she was very broken at that time as well. She has her own testimony about everything that she went through, and God filled her. And when she went home that day, my parents were just like such a shock that they were like, we have to go to this church. We have to go see what this is about, because my sister didn't have a good relationship with them either. So they saw how she was acting, and by her testimony, they believed. And so they came, and that's when they started coming. And it was just such an amazing time in my life, a breakthrough and just joy and peace and love, and seeing God move such an amazing way. Yeah, and one of the dreams that I had during that time that I was praying for my family before they came to church was that I was literally fighting something evil in the house. I was praying for, a spiritual battle. And I remember that I was in the backyard and I ran to the front of the house because I couldn't do it on my own. I fell on my knees and I lifted up my hands and I said, Lord, I said, Jesus, help me. I was calling on his name, and I lifted up my hands like all the way up on my knees, looking up into the sky. And when I looked, I saw that the sky opened, like a hole open of light. And then I saw a flash, like something came down. And when I looked to my right, because it landed right next to me, I saw Jesus. He was standing there in his fullness, but I couldn't see his face. It was just blurry. But I saw him, like it was him. Like when it's Jesus, it's Jesus. It was all him and his glory. And he had a big cloud of white light behind him, and he was also light. And he was looking at me. He had his robe and a red, like the red thing on. And he was looking at me. He was standing in front of my parents' house. For me, it was like letting me know that he's listening to my prayers and that he's there, that he came. And I remember looking at Jesus. The first thing I did was try to go hug him, of course. But he didn't let me, because no one can until, we're sinners. We cannot touch something so holy. And I understood that. And I remember he just walked into the turns and walked into the light. And I woke up. It was just such a beautiful experience, because not that long after that dream, my parents ended up coming to church, and I saw the glory of God. And every day they were transforming. And my mom ended up being free from alcohol, being free from the drugs that she was also in. All those things God freed her from, something that she was doing for so many years. God broke that curse. God broke that chain. Like, she is free from all of that. She doesn't desire that anymore. Praise the Lord. Fast forward, next year, me and my husband got married. A couple months after that, we ended up having a child. And by the next year, we were trying for another one, and so the next year after that we ended up having my baby girl, which now she's about 2 months now. And God has changed us so much. That was a boyfriend at the time. He became my husband, and he has changed completely. Like, when he came back to God, he gave all of himself, and God freed him from so much stuff that he had. And me too. We got deliverance, and we were so quick and growing in God, because it was the amount of surrender, the full surrender we gave to God. That determines how fast he's gonna move in your life. When you give all of yourself to God, there's no problem on his part. It's all on us and our decision and of our wants. Are we ready? Yeah, that's my testimony. Now my husband's preaching. He preaches in front of people, something we never thought would happen. We're trying to disciple others because we've been discipled. We went to classes in church and we grew so much. I ended up being in the worship team. I sing for the Lord, and there's so much things that I want to do for God that I ended up serving in the media team too. I want to serve in every area that I try, but I can't do everything. But now I want to evangelize. I want to take the next step to actually walk as a disciple, because that is the goal, to be a true disciple. So yeah, that's my testimony. There's a lot of things that I didn't include. It's too long, and this is already very long, but I hope that you watched to the end. And if you've watched, I hope this gives you hope that God is good and he is beautiful, and that he could change the circumstances. He took me from depression, from anxiety, from self-hate. After I accepted Jesus, and I was just so in love with him, and I was praying and I got free. We turned our life to Jesus. He ended up delivering me from the anxiety. I was starting to pray so hard about that anxiety. That's the first thing I started praying for. God, remove this anxiety so that I could get a job. It was so hard. I will tell you this. It was so hard to take that first step in faith to be free of anxiety, because there was a lot of work in me. I had a lot of demons, and God little by little removed them. But that was the first one, a big one. And he removed completely my anxiety. I ended up getting a job 3 months later. And God is just so good, because he provided for me. He showed up for me. And he wants to show up for you. He wants to be your best friend. All you have to decide is if you want to be the best friend of Jesus. Who wouldn't want to be? He's good. He's God. He wants to give you everything. He wants to give you the power and the authority and the victory to your battles. So, yeah, that's everything. If you want to continue to watch videos, if you want certain type of videos, just comment below, ideas or topics. I would love to talk about it. And, share my thoughts and my experiences, everything I've been through. I would love to share on it. And I hope that this channel grows so more people can see that Jesus is real, and that he is good, and that he could call somebody who didn't even know him. I didn't give nothing to him, but he called me, because it is all his love and grace. Is nothing that we can do to earn salvation. It's all his grace. All we need to do is believe. God bless you. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click the like and share button and subscribe.